The moment my badge stopped working, I knew. It was Monday morning, 8:10 a.m., and I was exactly 10 minutes late, something that had never happened before. The scanner at the employee entrance blinked red, not green. Again, red. I swiped it a third time before someone from accounting walked by with a sympathetic glance. "You might want to go straight to the main lobby, Jessica. He's waiting for you." I didn't need to ask who he was, and in that moment my chest tightened. Not from fear, but from disbelief. My name is Jessica Harper. I'm 38 years old, a single mother to a 6-year-old daughter named Lily, and I've worked 70-hour weeks for the last 3 years as Senior Operations Manager at Darrington Technologies. In those 3 years, I've missed birthdays, doctor's appointments, and even Lily's kindergarten graduation. All to meet deadlines, cover for team shortages, and frankly, keep the company from imploding during its aggressive expansion. But apparently, none of that mattered. "Jessica," my boss, Craig Whitmore, called out as soon as I stepped into the lobby. He didn't offer a smile. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Several team members were nearby, hovering awkwardly, sensing something was off but not daring to intervene. "I need to speak with you. Now." I followed him through the glass doors into the main conference room. No, "How's your daughter?" Not even a glance of concern. Just the click of polished shoes on tile and the heavy thud of the door closing behind us. He turned, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You were 10 minutes late." "I know, I'm so sorry. Lily spiked a fever last night. I called the on-call nurse twice and I didn't sleep. I got here as fast as I could." Craig didn't even blink. "So that's the excuse?" I paused, confused. "Excuse? Craig, I haven't been late. Ever. He raised a hand to cut me off, as if I were an employee he barely tolerated. "I don't want to hear it. Your loyalty is clearly elsewhere. We can't have people here who think personal problems are a free pass to break protocol." I blinked. I've worked 70-hour weeks since 2020. I haven't used a single sick day. I haven't even taken a full vacation since I started. And last month, when the Atlanta branch system crashed, I stayed in the office for 36 hours straight. "And now you're late," he interrupted, his voice cold and controlled. "And you're making this emotional, which tells me exactly what I need to know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a remote badge deactivator. I'd seen it once before, used only in high-level terminations. With a click and a blink of red light, he stared directly into my eyes and said, "Your badge has been deactivated. Security will escort you out." The room was silent. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. I just stared back at the man I had sacrificed 3 years of my life for. The man who had praised me for saving million-dollar contracts. The man who used my name in quarterly meetings as a prime example of dedication. I straightened my posture, nodded once, and said, "Understood." He looked disappointed, as if he expected me to cause a scene, as if drama would justify the public humiliation he'd just orchestrated. Instead, I walked out calmly, past my colleagues, past the reception desk, past the floor where I'd spent countless nights on client calls and crisis management. I didn't make eye contact with anyone, but I could feel the silence in every room I passed. Tight, suffocating, filled with disbelief. Security followed me to my desk as I packed up a framed photo of Lily, 2 notebooks, and a half-dead cactus I'd managed to keep alive longer than I'd been at the company. No one said a word, but a few eyes glistened. A few people knew this wasn't just about a late badge scan. This was personal. Craig had been waiting for an opportunity like this, and I'd handed it to him, courtesy of a sick child and a 10-minute delay. As I exited the building, the spring wind bit at my cheeks, and I felt the sting of shame settle in. Not for being fired, but for how quickly I was discarded. 3 years of loyalty erased in a single morning. At home, Lily was curled up on the couch under a blanket, watching cartoons. Her cheeks were flushed, but her fever had dropped slightly. I sat beside her, kissed her forehead, and smiled. You're home early, she mumbled. Yeah, I said softly. I get to spend more time with you today. But as I sat there, staring at the photo from my desk now on the coffee table, my phone buzzed. A message preview lit up the screen. From Eric Dalton, Vice President of Global Logistics at Devonridge Incorporated. Subject: Urgent. Can you talk today? I stared at the screen, pulse rising. Craig had no idea what was coming. I stared at the message from Eric Dalton for a few long seconds, the words blurring on the screen. Urgent. Can you talk today? The last time I'd spoken to Eric was over a year ago during a joint logistics project between Darrington Technologies and Devonridge Inc. He had been impressed with my ability to clean up a supply chain mess that threatened a $4.2 million deal. At the time, he called me the calm in a Category 5 storm. We'd kept in loose touch. A LinkedIn message here, a conference nod there. Nothing personal, nothing deep. But now he was reaching out with urgent in the subject line, on the exact day I got fired. That wasn't a coincidence. Still in my work clothes, I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, trying to steady my thoughts. The image of Craig's smug face flashed through my mind again. The click of that badge remote. The silence in the office as I walked out. It wasn't just termination. It was execution. Swift, cold, and very, very public. I picked up my phone and dialed. Jessica, Eric answered on the first ring. His voice was sharp, businesslike, but not unkind. Is now a good time? It is, I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. How can I help you? I heard what happened this morning. Of course he had. Word always traveled fast in this industry, especially when one of the top-performing managers in the Western Division gets fired like a security risk. I'm sorry it went down like that, he continued. But I won't lie, it pushed something we've been discussing internally at Devonridge to the top of our agenda. I blinked. Internally? We've been following your work for a while, Jessica. You built Darrington's operations arm from a duct-taped spreadsheet system to a fully integrated, data-driven logistics model in under 2 years. You turned their East Coast division around in 2021. And you're the only reason that Atlanta recovery didn't collapse the whole southern corridor last fall. I swallowed hard. I'd always known I did good work, but hearing it listed out like that, like evidence in a courtroom, hit something deep. We want to talk to you about joining us, he said plainly. We were planning to approach you later this quarter, but now that you're free, we'd like to accelerate things. My brain buzzed with 1,000 thoughts, but I stayed composed. I appreciate that. Truly. But I'll need a day or two to process everything. Of course, Eric said. We'll schedule a call for Wednesday. Just know this. What Craig did wasn't just cruel. It was foolish. His loss could be our gain. And I'm not just saying that. I've got board approval and budget in place. This is real. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, the glass of water still full in front of me. This wasn't just about getting fired. It was about what the firing revealed. I thought back to my first year at Darrington. I'd taken the job 3 weeks after my divorce was finalized. Lily was only 3 then, still waking up crying in the night, still confused about why Daddy didn't come home anymore. I'd accepted the position for stability. I told myself it was just a stepping stone. But when Craig promoted me after only 7 months and started calling me his go-to fixer, I leaned in. I gave more. I stayed late. I said yes to everything. I remember the winter of 2021. Lily caught RSV, and I worked remotely from the hospital room while she was on oxygen. Craig called me 3 times that night. Not to ask how she was, but to get updates on a shipping delay from our Dallas warehouse. I gave him the updates. I didn't push back. I thought loyalty would be rewarded. Last year, when our department hit its highest efficiency rating in company history, I stayed up until midnight building the presentation he used to impress the board. He didn't even include my name. But I told myself it didn't matter. One day, it'll pay off, I kept saying. Until it didn't. Until 10 minutes of being human, of being a mother, erased 3 years of being a machine. That evening, as Lily slept soundly in her room, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't open job boards. I didn't update my resume. Instead, I wrote a list. Everything I had done in the past 3 years that went above and beyond. 16 overnight shifts, 3 major project recoveries, $11.7 million in saved accounts, 0 vacation days taken, 1 child raised alone. As I looked at that list, the anger I hadn't let myself feel began to rise. Craig had framed me as disloyal, but I had been loyal to a fault. And he had underestimated something far more dangerous than revenge, a woman with nothing to lose and the receipts to prove it. My phone buzzed again. A message from Thomas, our senior analyst. He's acting like you were some disposable intern. People are furious. Something tells me this isn't over. He was right. It wasn't. And 1 week later, Craig Whitmore would find himself on the receiving end of a phone call that would unravel everything. By Tuesday, the fallout had begun. It started with whispers, then text messages, then calls that came in quick succession from former colleagues. I wasn't answering most of them. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not yet. I needed space. Not to grieve the loss of the job. I wasn't grieving Craig's approval, or the long hours, or the empty praise. I was grieving my own silence. The times I should have spoken up and didn't. The times I let his tough love pass as leadership. The times I thought that being needed meant I was valued. But the people I had worked beside, the ones who'd seen me carry that department week after week, they weren't staying silent. Thomas was the first to call again. I answered this time. "Hey," I said, settling onto my living room couch. Lily was napping, finally fever-free. The house was quiet for the first time in days. "You should know what's happening," he said immediately. "There was a meeting this morning. Craig blamed your dismissal on, get this, repeated tardiness and insubordination. He said you'd been warned multiple times." I sat up straight. "That's a lie." "I know. Everyone in that room knew. You've never even been late before." HR looked stunned. Someone asked to see the documentation, and Craig said it was confidential. The energy was weird. A few of us looked around like, are we really letting this happen? Are people buying it? He sighed. "Some are, but not the ones who worked closest with you. Michelle looked like she wanted to throw something. And the junior staff? They're scared. If they can fire you like that, what does that say about the rest of us?" That was the heart of it. My firing wasn't just unjust. It was a warning shot. I thanked Thomas and hung up, my thoughts racing. Craig wasn't just trying to erase me. He was rewriting history, controlling the narrative before someone else could, before I could. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't interested in a public fight. Not yet. Because the best kind of justice doesn't come from shouting. It comes from timing. By Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed again. This time with a calendar invite from Eric Dalton's assistant. Zoom call, 11 a.m. I logged in 10 minutes early, my hair freshly brushed, a clean navy blouse on, coffee in hand. Professional, calm, and focused. At exactly 11 o'clock, Eric appeared on screen with 2 other people. Maya Jensen, Devon Ridge's chief people officer, and Leo Campos, head of strategic operations. All names I recognized. All decision makers. "Jessica," Maya said warmly, "thank you for taking the time. I'm grateful for the opportunity." Eric got right to the point. "We'd like to offer you a formal position. Director of Strategic Logistics. You'd be leading cross-department teams and spearheading our national optimization rollout starting next quarter." I blinked, the words hitting faster than I could absorb. "The salary is competitive," Maya continued. "But more importantly, we're committed to work-life balance. Your schedule would be flexible, remote when needed. We understand your role as a parent is part of who you are, not an obstacle." That was when it happened. Tears welled in my eyes. unexpected and uncontrollable. I turned away from the camera for a moment, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," I whispered, dabbing quickly with the tissue. "It's just, that's the first time anyone said that to me, that being a mom wasn't a problem." Maya's smile softened. "It's not. It never should have been." I accepted the offer on the spot, not out of revenge, not to prove something, but because for the first time in years, I felt like a person, not just a machine with a title. That afternoon, the Darrington rumors began snowballing. A message from Michelle popped up. "Just found out Craig is trying to block a reference check about you. HR is not happy." Another from an intern I had mentored. "Your desk is still empty. Like they don't know what to do without you." And then this, from Thomas. "Eric Dalton called the office today. Asked for Craig. Apparently said it was urgent." That message hit like a thunderclap. Craig's perfect PR cover, his fake story about my insubordination, was about to meet something stronger than denial. A client with power, a company with leverage, a reputation he couldn't silence. He thought he could erase me in front of the entire office and walk away untouched. But what he didn't realize was that I had left behind more than just a cactus and a framed photo on my desk. I had left behind a reputation, a ripple. And now the tide was starting to turn. By Thursday morning, Craig's carefully manufactured image was cracking. And this time, it wasn't behind closed doors. Michelle called me, her voice low but quick, like she was stepping outside just to talk. "You won't believe what's going on here." I leaned against my kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear. "Craig had an emergency meeting with the executive team first thing this morning. Something about containing misinformation. But no one knows what that even means. Then we got a company-wide email asking employees not to comment on personnel matters. It was bizarre. I could picture it. The panicked scrambling, the vague threats masked as policy reminders. The signs of someone losing control but trying desperately to pretend otherwise." Michelle continued. "Word is, Devon Ridge called again. Not just Eric. Their legal team. Apparently, Craig's trying to bury your termination under security concerns, so he doesn't have to explain why their favorite ops contact suddenly vanished." I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence speak for itself. "Jess," she added, "people are scared. But they're not buying the story anymore. They're remembering who actually kept this place running. It wasn't him." That was the first time I let myself feel the smallest ounce of satisfaction. Not gloating, not revenge, recognition. Later that afternoon, I received a message from HR. Not Darrington's, but from Devon Ridge's HR team, confirming my new employee paperwork and onboarding schedule. There it was. The official start of my next chapter. No looking back. But Craig was very much still looking back. Still trying to clean up a mess he didn't realize had grown bigger than his corner office. Thomas messaged me again. Craig tried to schedule a call with Eric to clear the air. Eric refused. Said he's taking it up with the board. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a personal win. It was a shift. One man's arrogance was putting millions in partnerships at risk. You don't just humiliate your highest performing employee in front of a company and expect to walk away clean. Not when that employee had built the relationships you relied on. Friday came, the day Craig received the call. I didn't witness it, but I didn't need to. The aftermath said enough. Thomas's message came in first. Craig stormed out of the office after a 40-minute call, slammed his door so hard the lights flickered. No one's seen him since. A few minutes later, Michelle added, "Confirmed. Devon Ridge is pulling back. They said they're reevaluating external vendor relationships, which is basically code for we're done." And just like that, the number Craig had bragged about at every board meeting, the Darrington Devon Ridge account, was slipping through his fingers. I wondered if he thought about the moment he called me disloyal, if he replayed it in his mind. The way he deactivated my badge in front of the team. The way he expected me to fall apart. Instead, I walked out. With dignity. with my name intact. And now, a week later, the silence I left behind had turned into an echo so loud even the board couldn't ignore it. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, I sat on the balcony with a glass of tea, watching the city glow in the twilight. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the transcript popped up. Jessica, this is Heather Chambers, chairwoman of the board at Darrington. I'd like to speak with you regarding recent developments. If you're willing, please call me back at your earliest convenience. I smiled faintly, placing the phone face down. They were starting to realize the truth. That leadership isn't proven in titles or corner offices. It's proven when the storm hits. And who's holding the line? Craig hadn't led. He'd controlled. He'd dominated, micromanaged, and weaponized policy. But when the pressure came, he had no foundation to stand on. No trust. No team. He'd mistaken fear for respect. And now, without me there to hold the weight, everything was collapsing. Monday would mark the start of my new position at Devonridge, a company that valued more than just availability, a company that saw motherhood as strength, not a liability, a company that had my name in the door before I'd even stepped inside. But before that, I had one more decision to make. To take that call from the board chair, or let Craig finally face the consequences of his own design. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew this much. What he did to me wasn't going to be forgotten, because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's watching everything they built crumble, without ever having to raise your voice. Monday arrived with a chill in the air, but inside me it felt like spring. I zipped up my best blazer, the one I used to save for quarterly reviews that led nowhere, and tied my hair back. As I glanced in the mirror, I realized something strange. I wasn't nervous, not even a little. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking into a building where I had to prove I belonged. This time, I'd been invited in, for what I'd already done and who I already was. Lily stood in the hallway, holding her backpack. "Are you going to work today, Mommy?" "I am," I smiled. "To a brand new job." She tilted her head. "Do they know you're my mom?" I knelt down and looked into her eyes. "Yes, and they think that's one of the best parts about me." She grinned. That was enough. Devonridge's offices were nothing like Darrington's gray cubes and dim lighting. Here, glass walls let the sunlight pour in. The energy was sharp but collaborative. People moved with purpose, but not panic. At reception, I was greeted with a welcome badge already printed, a branded notebook, and a handwritten card from Eric. "Jessica, we're thrilled to have you. Your reputation precedes you. Let's build something amazing." I hadn't even reached my desk before two team leads introduced themselves and offered to walk me through their open projects. No defensiveness, no ego. Just professionals eager to collaborate. At 10 a.m., I joined my first executive strategy meeting. I wasn't sitting silently in the back row anymore. I was at the table. Maya, the chief people officer, gave me a nod before I spoke. "Jessica, I'd love to hear your thoughts." I opened my notes calmly. Years of preparation now flowing out like second nature. I presented a risk assessment model I'd built over the weekend to help Devonridge streamline vendor reviews, something that had taken Darrington months to even begin addressing. When I finished, the room was quiet for half a beat. Then came nods, then questions, real ones, thoughtful ones. And then Eric leaned back and smiled. "Exactly why we hired you." I wasn't holding my breath anymore. Meanwhile, back at Darrington, the silence I had left behind had turned to noise. Michelle messaged me during lunch. 3 resignations this morning. One from procurement, one from logistics, one from IT. All said the same thing in their exit interviews. Jessica was the reason I stayed this long. And then, Craig's office door is still closed. No one's seen him since Friday afternoon. Rumor is the board is reviewing certain decisions. Whatever that means. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The avalanche had already begun. That evening, Lily and I sat at the kitchen table eating spaghetti. A quiet, simple dinner. She told me about a book she was reading in class. I told her about a big table in a big room where everyone listened when I spoke. She chewed her pasta, then asked, "Are you the boss now?" I laughed. Something like that. "But you're still my mom, right?" I leaned across the table and kissed her forehead. "Always." And in that moment, I realized something powerful. All those years I spent trying to prove I could be a perfect employee despite being a mother. I had missed the point. My strength wasn't in spinning plates. It was in knowing which ones mattered most. Later that night, I sat on the couch with my laptop, reviewing onboarding files for my new team. I had just closed my screen when my phone buzzed again. A voicemail transcript appeared. "Jessica, this is Heather Chambers. I understand you're now at Devon Ridge. I respect your decision, but I'd still appreciate 10 minutes of your time. There are ongoing concerns at Darrington that I believe you should be aware of." I reread it twice. So they knew. And they were starting to reckon with it. Craig hadn't just made a bad call. He'd exposed the rot beneath the surface, the cracks in their culture, the myth of loyalty that only flowed one way. Now they wanted insight, maybe even absolution. But the truth was, I had already moved on. I wasn't looking for apologies, because you don't rise by clinging to the people who dragged you down. You rise by stepping into rooms where you don't have to apologize for your existence. It was Wednesday afternoon when the final piece clicked into place. Devon Ridge's quarterly operations review was in full swing. I had just finished presenting a strategy shift that would reduce third-party vendor costs by 17%, and the executive team was already discussing how to scale the model. It was the kind of meeting where ideas flowed like water, where no one cared who spoke first, only what was said. After the meeting, Eric pulled me aside. "Just wanted you to know," he said casually, "we've officially ended the vendor agreement with Darrington. Legal sent the notice this morning." I felt a twinge of surprise, not because it happened, but because it was so quiet. No dramatic final word, no public declaration, just a signature, a timestamp, and a shift in business. "They're done?" I asked. He nodded. "We're moving everything in-house or to smaller firms. We'll still need a transition coordinator to manage the split. We'd like that to be you." It was a moment full of symmetry. 1 week ago, Craig had fired me in front of my peers, badge deactivated, dignity stripped. And now, I was the one overseeing the offboarding of the same account he thought I had no claim to. Poetic justice, I suppose. But I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just nodded, calm and clear. "Of course, I'll handle it." Because I wasn't here to settle scores. I was here to lead. That night, I finally returned Heather Chambers' call. She answered quickly, voice clipped but composed. "Jessica, thank you for returning my message." "Of course." "I'll be direct," she said. "We've been reviewing the circumstances around your termination. It's become clear that there were serious procedural issues and personal biases involved." I didn't speak. I let her continue. "We were unaware of the extent of your contributions until we began to audit the accounts you managed. It appears your departure has significantly destabilized both client trust and internal morale." There it was. The admission. Not quite an apology, but close. She cleared her throat. "Craig Whitmore has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Another pause. "We'd like to formally offer you reinstatement at Darrington, at an executive level, full autonomy, substantially revised compensation, and a public acknowledgement of your achievements." My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. It would have been easy to imagine this moment a week ago. Craving it, waiting for it, wanting them to come back and see me, truly see me, after all those years. But something in me had shifted. I didn't want a title born out of damage control. I didn't want their validation now that it cost them something. "I appreciate the offer," I said calmly, "but I've already accepted a position elsewhere." Heather didn't push. "May I ask where?" "I think you already know." Another pause. This one longer. Then, "I do." There was no bitterness in her voice, only a quiet understanding. "I wish you well, Jessica," she said. "Thank you. I hope Darrington learns from this." "I believe we will." We ended the call on polite professional terms. No hard edges, no lingering resentment. Just closure. The next morning, I stood in front of my team at Devon Ridge, running a workshop on account management transitions. One of the younger analysts, Ava, stayed behind afterward. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "It's rare to see someone like you, someone who's good at their job and makes space for the rest of us." I smiled. You don't have to choose between being strong and being kind. That's something I learned the hard way. She nodded thoughtfully before leaving the room. As I packed up my notes, I looked at the large windows framing the skyline. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking out wondering if I belonged somewhere else. I was already there. Later that week, I received a package. No sender listed. Inside was a small, square box. I opened it to find my old desk photo, the one of Lily and me, perfectly intact. Taped to the back was a handwritten note on company stationery. "For what it's worth, you were never invisible. We just didn't have your courage. Thank you for showing us how to walk out with our heads high. M." I didn't have to guess who M was. I placed the photo on my new desk at Devon Ridge, not as a reminder of where I'd been, but of what I'd overcome. They say revenge is best served cold, but I don't believe that anymore. Because the best revenge? It's not silence. It's not success. It's not even justice. It's becoming the version of yourself you were never allowed to be. And never looking back. We will have so much more fun without you. The words echoed in my ears long after the phone call ended. I stared blankly at the wall of my apartment, the silence around me suddenly deafening. My mother's voice, always sharp and certain, had never sounded so deliberate and cruel. I tried to laugh. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe they were testing me, one of Mom's twisted little games. But then I checked the family group chat again. The photos told a different story. Sun-soaked smiles, poolside drinks, matching shirts that read, "Summer 2023, family first." Except I wasn't in any of the photos, not even a mention. Just days before, I'd been told the annual family vacation would be postponed due to budgeting. No trip this year. "We all need to be more responsible," Dad had said in his classic voice of calm logic. So I canceled my leave at work and rescheduled meetings I had carefully cleared. And now here they were. Mom, Dad, my two brothers, their wives, and even my teenage niece, posing in front of the five-star Amalfi Coast resort I had suggested 6 months ago. No explanation, no invitation, just silence. Until I called. "Claire," Mom had sighed, exasperated. "You're always so sensitive. We just thought we could use some time to relax without any intensity." "Intensity," I'd repeated. "You're always working, always serious. Honestly, we'll have so much more fun without you." That was the moment. The second something inside me didn't just crack, it snapped. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "Got it. Thanks for the clarity," and hung up. I sat alone for hours, unmoving. Not sad, not exactly. Number like I'd just watched myself get written out of my own life story. This wasn't new, not really. I'd been the afterthought for years. Growing up, I was the organized one, the old soul. While my brothers wrestled, partied, and racked up demerits, I color-coded my notes and taught myself how to build websites in middle school. I got my first job at 16, full ride to Stanford, MBA at Wharton. And by 32, I was heading strategy at a growing hospitality tech startup. But at home, none of it mattered. I was just Claire, the uptight one, the too serious sister, the difficult daughter. When I bought my first condo, Dad made a comment about me, overcompensating for not having a boyfriend. When my app got featured in Forbes, Mom said, "Oh, your brother's friend got an article in something called Business Insider. That's similar, right? It was like I was invisible unless they could somehow use me. And maybe that's what stung the most. That after everything, the time, the calls I answered late at night, the flights home for every birthday and graduation, they didn't just forget me. They chose to leave me out. Still, it wasn't until later that night, as I lay in bed scrolling through the hotel's website, that an idea began to take shape. A ridiculous, delicious, impossible idea. The resort looked familiar. I recognized the branding. Not surprising. The logo design and customer journey map came from a boutique consultancy I'd quietly acquired last year. Through a shell company, my startup had purchased a portfolio of small agencies specializing in high-end hospitality rebrands. And this particular resort? One of our flagship success stories. I tapped through the staff bios, and there he was, Luca D'Angelo, general manager, former mentor, one of the kindest, sharpest minds I'd worked with in Italy. I clicked contact, but didn't type anything yet. Instead, I stared at the blinking cursor and asked myself one question. What would happen if they saw me not as Claire the afterthought, but as Claire, the architect of the very luxury they were now enjoying without me? The next morning, I pulled out my laptop, brewed a double espresso, and got to work. The plan had to be meticulous, strategic, cinematic. Because this time, I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to show them exactly who they had underestimated. And it would begin with one perfectly timed email. Subject, Presidential Suite Reservation Request. Claire Moretti. CEO Luca responded within 6 hours. Cara Claire, of course I remember you. What a surprise. I had no idea you were connected to H&T Ventures. Makes perfect sense now. What can I do for you? His warm, slightly formal tone made me smile. He always called me Cara, dear. It reminded me of late-night work sessions in Milan, back when I was still proving myself and he was running operations like a symphony. He had taught me more about grace under pressure than any professor ever could. They're staying at your hotel, Luca. My family. But they don't know I'm connected to the property. Ah. His reply came after a pause. Understood. Say no more. Just tell me what you'd like to arrange. And so I did. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about perspective. If they couldn't see me when I stood in front of them, maybe they'd finally see me when I walked in through a different door. The one with power behind it. I booked the presidential suite for myself. A sprawling villa-style setup on the cliffside, with private terraces and a full staff team. I also booked the Florentine ballroom for a private VIP client experience to take place on their last night. Luca didn't even flinch. He upgraded their rooms to the executive tier, comped under a strategic client courtesy, and promised to discreetly manage the reveal. Shall I inform them ahead of time? He asked in a follow-up call. No, I said, sipping my espresso. Let it unfold naturally, but when I arrive, I'd like the manager on duty to greet me personally. Make it elegant. Of course, Claire, with pleasure. And just like that, the game was set in motion. But I wasn't going to show up in the middle of their vacation as the angry outcast crashing the party. That would have just confirmed their worst assumptions about me. I had a week to prepare. A week to become not just someone they couldn't ignore, but someone they never imagined they'd need to respect. I dove into the details with surgical focus. Wardrobe, clean lines, tailored, neutral luxury. I had no interest in designer labels screaming for attention, but everything I packed whispered custom-made. Linen jumpsuits from a tiny atelier in Palermo, sandals from a family-run leather workshop in Ravello, a pendant that used to belong to my grandmother, reset into a minimalist gold setting. Makeup? Light. Hair? Polished but simple. No overcompensation, no performance. Power, when real, doesn't need a costume. And yet, beneath the poise I was curating, something darker simmered. I couldn't stop hearing Mom's voice. We'll have so much more fun without you. That was the part that hit me hardest. Not the fact that they lied, Not the fact that they went without telling me, but that sentence, that cruel little truth they didn't bother to dress up. It had been hanging in the air my entire life. They just finally said it out loud. So I channeled it. I funneled every bit of that sting into the plan. I even reviewed the hotel's guest interaction protocol. The very playbook I helped draft for Luca's property when we overhauled their luxury experience flow. I made notes on how the front desk should address me, when to offer the champagne, and how to cue the staff for recognition. This wasn't about spectacle. It was about precision. By Friday morning, my flight itinerary was confirmed. A private charter arranged by my firm's travel partner. My assistant, Natalie, looked up from the screen when she handed me the final printout. You know, they're not going to see this coming. I'm not doing this for them to be shocked, I replied. I'm doing it so I never have to shrink again. She paused, then nodded. Well, I hope you make them uncomfortable enough to finally sit in their silence. I smiled. Natalie had been with me since I started building this company out of a shared office space and a secondhand MacBook. She knew the weight I carried, and where it came from. That night, I packed everything with calm exactness. Then I sat at my desk and wrote one last thing. A letter. Not for them, for myself. A reminder that my worth never depended on their acceptance. I folded it and placed it inside my carry-on next to my boarding pass. As I zipped the bag, I glanced out at the city skyline, glowing against the night. They'd made the trip without me. Now I was coming, but on my own terms. And they had no idea that the woman walking through the marble lobby next would be the one who owned the story they were still trying to write me out of. The resort came into view like a dream. White stone buildings carved into the cliffs, olive trees swaying in the breeze, and the sea stretched out in endless blue. As the car climbed the winding road, I sat in the back seat in silence, hands folded, posture composed. Luca had sent a private driver, of course, a black Mercedes with tinted windows and chilled mineral water waiting in the cup holder. I could have arrived on the same shuttle service the rest of the guests used. I could have passed through the same check-in lines, allowed chance to dictate the encounter. But this wasn't about chance. This was about clarity. The car slowed as we passed the entrance gate, where a discreet gold sign read, Villa Carmela, a Sullivan and Moretti property. My name wasn't on it, of course, not publicly, but I'd overseen the merger that brought this property into our portfolio. I'd been the one to negotiate the architectural changes that elevated it into a luxury sanctuary. Now I was here to walk through the world I had helped build, and finally be seen. The Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway lined with cypress trees. Bellboys moved with practiced elegance, welcoming guests in soft tones. As my driver opened the door, I stepped out calmly, taking in the view like I belonged. Because I did. Miss Moretti. A familiar voice called from the marble steps. Luca, ever impeccable in a navy suit and a linen pocket square, approached with a warm smile and outstretched hands. Benvenuta. Welcome home. Thank you, Luca, I replied, returning his embrace. It's good to be here. I've taken care of everything, he said, lowering his voice. Your suite is ready, the staff is briefed, and the family arrived yesterday afternoon. They're lively, as expected. I gave a dry laugh. That's one word for it. As he led me through the lobby, all cascading light and hand-carved wood accents, guests turned to glance at me, subtly curious. I didn't stand out. Not flashy, not famous, but I carried myself like someone who didn't need permission to be there. That's the difference I'd learned. Not the clothes, not the titles, the knowing. We passed the reception desk where the clerk greeted me as Signora Moretti and presented my room key with a velvet-lined folder. Within minutes, I was being escorted to the presidential suite via a private elevator, while a second staff member took my luggage through a side entrance to avoid disturbance. The suite was just as I remembered from the design mock-ups. Italian marble floors, panoramic views of the coast, an infinity pool that seemed to pour into the sea. Every detail, from the citrus-scented towels to the curated art, spoke of understated opulence. I stood by the window for a moment, looking down at the main pool area. There they were, my family, sunbathing, drinking, laughing. My mother reclined beneath a striped umbrella, talking animatedly to my brother Mark. Dad was chatting with the bartender. Olivia, my niece, scrolled through her phone while dipping her feet in the water. And then, there she was. My other sister-in-law, Tessa, wearing the same silk wrap I had gifted her last Christmas, the one she'd claimed she never received. I watched them through the glass as a dull ache pressed behind my ribs. Not anger, not even betrayal. Just a familiar kind of absence. A hollow where belonging should have been. The doorbell rang. Miss Moretti. The concierge said softly, "Your welcome lunch is served on the terrace." "Perfect," I replied. "Please let the front desk know I'll be attending the client event in the ballroom tomorrow. Oh, and make a note for the kitchen. No shellfish. My niece is allergic." He blinked, surprised. "Of course. We'll accommodate that right away." Small details. Tiny threads of care. Quiet reminders that I knew these people better than they ever tried to know me. That afternoon, I moved through the property like a ghost. I didn't approach them, didn't interrupt their illusion. But I was there, in the hallway behind them at dinner, in the elevator 1 floor above, in the same boutique where Tessa complained about the wine prices, not realizing the bottle she was holding bore a label I had helped bring to market. At one point, I caught my niece looking up from the poolside lounge and spotting me through the restaurant window. Her gaze lingered, curious. I simply smiled, then turned and walked away. Tomorrow would be the reveal. But today? Today was the calm before the shift, and I wanted them to feel it, that unsettled breath, that flicker of something they couldn't quite name, because something was coming, and it had my name on it. The next morning began like a scene from a film. Clear skies, a slow breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and salt, the sound of gentle waves rolling below the cliffside. I woke early, not from nerves. Those had faded, but from the feeling that today marked a shift, a turning point. One I had waited for, even if I never admitted it to myself until now. My phone buzzed, a message from Luca. "Everything is set. Staff is briefed. Ballroom is prepped. We begin at noon." I replied with a thumbs up, then took my time getting ready. A white sleeveless jumpsuit tapered at the waist, gold cuffs at the wrists, hair down in loose waves, soft makeup, and the sapphire ring my grandmother left me. The look was deliberate, clean, professional, regal, but understated. It didn't scream for attention. It simply expected it. At 11:45, I left the suite and descended to the main floor through a private corridor that led to the east wing, where the ballroom waited. It had been transformed overnight. Round tables covered in white linen, a branded backdrop featuring my firm's logo alongside the resort's, and soft instrumental music playing over the sound system. The family thought it was a corporate event they'd been invited to by the manager as a surprise, one of the perks of their complimentary executive upgrade. They had no idea they were the guests of honor, and the lesson. I waited just outside the side entrance as Luca welcomed the group. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're honored to host a private showcase today. The CEO of one of our primary partners is here to share a few words and personally thank some of our most valued guests. Please enjoy your champagne. She'll be with you shortly." I could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, chairs being pulled back, a few polite laughs, then silence. My cue. I stepped through the side doors, back straight, chin high, the heels of my sandals echoing softly across the marble floor. It took them a few seconds to register. First my niece, her glass halfway to her lips, then my brother, who did a double take, then Mom. Her mouth opened slightly, eyes darting toward Luca, then back to me. She looked confused, disoriented, like her mind couldn't compute the scene unfolding. "Good afternoon," I said, standing at the front of the room with calm authority. "Thank you all for being here." Stillness. I let the silence stretch a moment longer, then continued. My name is Claire Moretti. I'm the founder and CEO of Moretti Strategies, a brand consultancy that partners with luxury hospitality brands around the world, including this one. I paused again. I'd like to extend a personal welcome to our guests here today, especially the Moretti family. The gasp was audible. Olivia looked at me with wide eyes. Mark's hand dropped from his wine glass. Tessa blinked hard, as if trying to convince herself she was dreaming. My mother? Still frozen, like a statue carved from disbelief. This resort, I continued, is one of our portfolio's flagship partners. We helped redesign their brand identity, guest experience, and digital strategy. I've worked closely with the management team here since the early planning stages. Some of the artwork you see on the walls was curated from a collection I personally sourced. The champagne you're drinking? Bottled under a private label we launched last year. I smiled gently. And the reason you're in upgraded suites, enjoying complimentary services, and sitting in this room is because I asked them to take care of you. My voice never wavered. Not once. I let the words settle. Not in anger, not in superiority. In truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging to be seen. I simply stood where I belonged. I'd like to invite Luca to present a small gift to each of our guests. A token of appreciation for being part of this experience. Luca stepped forward, handing out gift bags with custom notes, luxury skincare kits, and personalized itinerary folders for the rest of their stay. Each one was labeled, courtesy of Claire Moretti. No one spoke. Until finally, my father. He rose slowly from his seat and looked at me across the table. Claire, he began, voice thick. Why didn't you tell us? And I answered simply, because you never asked. Then I turned, thanked the staff, and exited through the same side door I came in through. Not with drama, not with tears, but with dignity. And behind me, I left a room full of people still trying to understand how the daughter they had dismissed had just redefined every rule they thought they understood. I didn't go back to the ballroom. After the reveal, I walked the long outer corridor of the resort until I reached the sculpture garden overlooking the coast. A place of silence and wind. A place meant for reflection. I sat on the marble bench tucked beneath a flowering trellis, closed my eyes, and let the sea speak. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. There was no applause, no parade. Only the satisfying weight of my own stillness. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't editing myself to make others more comfortable. I wasn't explaining or softening or proving. I had simply stood in my truth. And that was enough. A soft voice pulled me from the breeze. Claire? I opened my eyes. It was Olivia, my niece, standing a few feet away, fidgeting with the hem of her sundress. Can I sit? She asked. I nodded, gesturing to the empty space beside me. She lowered herself onto the bench and sat in silence for a moment, legs tucked beneath her, eyes on the sea. That was really intense, she said finally. I gave a soft chuckle. Yeah, it was. They didn't know anything. Number they didn't. I think I'm the only one who suspected something, she added, glancing at me. You were just different this time. Confident. Like you didn't care if anyone approved. I didn't, I said simply. She nodded, pulling her knees to her chest. They've always talked about you like you were the difficult one, she admitted, her voice quiet. But I never really understood why. You've always been the one who showed up. You came to every recital. You helped me pick out my first laptop. And you never bragged about anything. I turned to look at her, heart softening. Thank you. She hesitated, then said, I think they just don't know how to deal with someone who doesn't need them. That landed hard. Not cruel, just accurate. I didn't need their approval. I never had. But I had wanted something more dangerous than that. I had wanted to be understood. We sat for a while longer before Olivia stood, brushing off her dress. "I think they're all kind of freaking out," she said with a smirk. "Dad said you staged an ambush." Grandma looked like she saw a ghost. Grandpa keeps checking his phone like he's trying to figure out what planet he's on. I couldn't help but laugh. "That sounds about right." She gave me a sideways hug, awkward, teenaged, but sincere. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Then she disappeared down the garden path. By the time I returned to my suite that evening, the sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting the resort in golden pink light. On the table inside my suite, I found 3 envelopes, each one handwritten, each from a different member of my family. I sat down and opened them, one by one. From Dad. "Claire, I don't know how to begin. I thought I knew who you were, focused, serious, too busy for all of this. But the truth is, I didn't know anything. Not really. And that's on me. I see now that you've built something extraordinary. And I see how blind we've been. I'm sorry for not seeing you sooner. Dad from Mark, my older brother. Claire, look, I'm not great with words, but I owe you an apology. We treated you like a footnote for years, and then we were surprised when you didn't beg for a seat at the table. The truth is, we should have been asking you how to build the damn table in the first place. Mark. From Mom. Claire, I'm still trying to process everything. I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you. But I see now how my words, my choices, have done just that. I was wrong. You're not too serious. You're not difficult. You're extraordinary. And I hope somehow we can rebuild. Mom. I placed the letters gently on the table and sat back, letting the words sink in. They didn't erase everything, but they mattered. For years, I had lived in the shadows of their expectations. Too much, too little, too different. I had built walls to protect myself, made peace with being on the outside. But now, the walls were still there, but the doors were open. They could walk through if they were willing to meet me where I truly was, not where they remembered me to be. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the terrace. The air smelled of rosemary and salt. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible daughter. I felt like me, seen, rooted. The morning of our final day arrived slowly, wrapped in a thick hush that felt different from the previous days. The usual hum of chatter over breakfast had been replaced by a tentative quiet. No more smug laughter. No clinking of glasses or careless teasing. Instead, soft greetings, side glances, and something unfamiliar from my family. Respect. I watched from the upper terrace as they gathered near the garden patio, each of them dressed for the group tour of the coastal vineyards. An outing they had signed up for long before knowing I'd be there. No one had mentioned canceling. Instead, they looked unsure. Like they didn't know where to place me now that I no longer fit into the role they'd assigned me years ago. And honestly, I didn't fit there anymore. I wasn't trying to. That was the beauty of all this. I hadn't changed to prove them wrong. I had simply shown them the version of me they had chosen not to see. And now they were left to catch up. I decided to walk with them to the shuttle. Not to confront, but to offer something else. Closure. Mom noticed me first. Her shoulders tensed before relaxing. Claire? She said, almost too softly. Morning, I replied, falling into step beside her. We walked in silence for a few beats. I meant what I wrote, she said. In the letter. I nodded. I know. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I stopped, turned to her. I'm not holding a grudge, I said calmly, but I am done trying to earn love that should have been offered unconditionally. Her eyes welled slightly. She nodded. I understand. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But she wanted to. And that was enough for now. The vineyard tour was relaxed, scenic, a buffer between tension and understanding. I stayed near Olivia, who walked beside me like an anchor, asking questions about the wine, the land, my business. It was only halfway through the tasting that I realized my brothers had shifted. They weren't cracking jokes at my expense. They weren't ignoring me. They were listening. When I explained the role of digital strategy in boutique hospitality success, Mark leaned in and said, "You ever think about teaching this stuff?" It wasn't much, but it was new. The final evening, I returned to the terrace where I had watched them that first night. Only this time, I wasn't an outsider. I was just me. Claire, daughter, CEO, woman who didn't need to be less to be included. Luca joined me briefly, 2 glasses of Prosecco in hand. "You did it," he said, raising his glass. "I didn't do it to win," I replied. "No," he agreed, "but you did win something, just not what they expected." We clinked glasses. As the sun dipped below the sea, my family gathered for one last group photo. This time, they looked for me. "Claire?" Olivia called, waving me over. "Come on, we need you in this one." I hesitated, then walked over slowly. Mom moved aside to make space next to her, and as I stepped in, she rested her hand gently on my shoulder. Not possessive, not performative, tentative, a quiet olive branch. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1. Click. I didn't know what the photo would look like, but I knew how I felt standing there. Not like a footnote, not like a ghost, but like a person who had returned not to be accepted, but to be seen for who she always was. The next morning, I left before them. I didn't say long goodbyes. I didn't need a dramatic exit. I simply checked out, thanked the staff, and walked through the lobby like someone who didn't have to prove a thing. Luca met me at the car. "I hope this won't be your last visit," he said. I smiled. "Next time, I won't bring an audience." As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time. Not at the resort. At the woman I had been when I arrived. Invisible. Excluded. Hurt. And at the woman I was now. Seen. Solid. Unshaken. This wasn't just a story about revenge. It was a story about reclamation. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up as yourself. Fully. Unapologetically. And let the truth do the talking. And when they finally see you, you'll realize you never needed their invitation. You were always the one holding the key.